Hello and welcome to the Quiet Riot, where we talk film, television, and media with an emphasis on older movies and nostalgic favorites. I'm Ainsley, and this is my sixth and final video where I discuss the Thin Man series. I have a playlist on my channel if you want to go and check out my previous videos where I give reviews on each film. In this video, I will be discussing the sixth and final Thin Man film, as well as rating and ranking all six films. Song of the Thin Man is the 13th out of 14 films that William Powell and Myrna Loy did together. One of them is Myrna Loy just making a brief appearance in it, more like a cameo, but they did appear in 15 films in total, and this one makes the 13th film. The film experienced a loss of $128,000, making it the least commercially successful film out of all of those, and it looks that this is the second worst in the series as far as ratings go, but that's from more of a modern point of view and just the reviews that are, able to be put up from a while ago, so I'm not really sure where it stands. So when it comes to older movies, I can't say that I necessarily trust the critics' viewpoints, and I can just more say if it was a critical or commercial success by what I'm able to bring up or find on the internet through my own personal research. It does seem as though this movie, while not the most critically successful or commercially successful, it is a loved film due to the fact that it does belong to a well-loved series that continues to be a favorite among film audiences. Now, I know that Myrna Loy was not a fan of this movie. She absolutely hated it, and she found it to be a very lackluster end to an otherwise great series. And I have to say that I don't necessarily agree, because for me personally, this isn't the worst one. I'll get to that a little bit more later when I do my rankings. But I do think that this film has its merits, and I can see where it is lackluster and where it seems a bit rushed in parts, particularly in the ending. One of my favorite things about all these movies are the ending, and that's really where my own personal feelings towards these films goes, and how I really brought the ranking together is how much I personally enjoyed the ending. And this one, in many aspects, I would say it probably has my least favorite ending. But the film as a whole was a lot more enjoyable than I initially expected. I did think this was going to be the worst one, and a lot of that came from some of the stuff that I have heard from, Mira Lawyer not liking it, the fact that it wasn't commercially successful, and it does suck that you wish that the last film in a series could be as good as the first, or the first two, or three. But oftentimes I do think the end, when you know it's going to be the end especially, and I feel that's probably what they knew was going to happen here, as this was the last project with MGM that Mira Loy had, that it was more of a rushed project and a project to capitalize on what had come before. Song of the Thin Man was directed by Edward Buzzell, from a screenplay by Steve Fisher and Nat Pierin, from a story by Stanley Roberts. The characters were of course based on characters by Dashiell Hammett from his novel The Thin Man. James O'Hanlon and Harry Crane added additional dialogue to the film. These various different people being involved in the writing process for this film is definitely noticeable. It is a bit cheesy in parts, and some of the dialogue just doesn't seem very reminiscent of previous installments, particularly those earlier ones. And with Dashiell Hammond not being involved, nor the original writers or the original director, that can definitely be seen in the execution of this one in the same way that it could be seen in the execution of The Thin Man Goes Home. The film was produced by Nat Perrin and starred William Powell, Myrna Loy, Keenan Wynn, Dean Stockwell, Philip Reed, Gloria Graham, and Patricia Morrison. Dean Stockwell was still a child during the making of this. He was a prolific child actor of the time, and he would later go on to be best remembered for his role in Quantum Leap in the 80s. Gloria Graham was also a popular star in film noir. She was quite often the femme fatale, and she plays a very similar role here, though she does sing in the movie. It is not actually her voice. Cinematography was done by Charles Washer, and the film was edited by Gene Ruggiero with music by David Snell. MGM produced this movie and it was being distributed by Lowe's Inc. The film was released on August 28th in 1947 in the US and had a running time of 86 minutes. The budget for the film was $1,670,000. A big part of what makes all of these movies so good is the chemistry that exists between William Powell and Myrna Loy, as well as their individual talent and energy that they bring to these characters and the story as a whole. But the writers as well as directors really play a big part in these movies, as they typically do on any film, of course, and same with the actors. It really is a joint effort in making an enjoyable movie and a successful one. And in the case of this movie, there were a lot of, again, lackluster. It's probably going to be a word that I use a lot in this video, but it is a bit lackluster, similar to the previous film, and I believe a big part of that is due to W.S. Van Dyke no longer being the director. He carried this series for 4 films, and even though you have that last movie that he directed that I personally think wasn't as good as the 3 that came before it, he still brought something special to this franchise, and that he did get to make those 2 last films due to his passing in 1943 it's always sad when someone dies, but then when they don't get to finish a project that is very much their own, it makes it a little sadder for the film world and for the fans of the series to not be able to see what it could have been. And I think a big part here too is that you had a lot of the same people who were involved in the writing, and that's why the first 3 especially, that has such a cohesive energy and atmosphere that doesn't necessarily exist in the last films, particularly the last 2. In this one, you can definitely see that there is a lot of people involved in the writing process, and then when you have that along with the direction of the director and the various other things that might be going on, it just adds a disservice to the film. Now, the thing I didn't like the most about this one is the ending and the way everything was wrapped up, though the film itself I didn't think was really all that bad, though I do think there were some moments between the characters and everyone involved that didn't necessarily make sense for this film series. It still was a lot better than I initially expected it to be, so I would say while, you have the first 4 films available to watch on HBO Max if you have it, that those are the ones that I would definitely recommend the most, though there's nothing that's really lacking so much in these final 2 films that wouldn't at least be a good choice to maybe rent it or find it somewhere else that you may be able to view it, because they still give you a laugh. Now I'm going to be ranking all 6 films of the Thin Man series. I'm going to discuss the plots a little bit more in this section, so it will be a little bit more spoilery. So if you haven't watched any of these movies, again, the first 4 are available on HBO Max. My least favorite of the Thin Man films is The Thin Man Goes Home, and a big part of the reason is not really at fault of anyone involved in the movie, but that was the fact that alcohol wasn't of a as big of a part for this movie. And that's not a necessity, but that is a big part of the character. And while there is a reason that they did that, because there was a shortage at the time, and they had him just drinking non-alcoholic cider, and it was a big part of contention between him and his father when it comes to William Powell, Nick Charles's drinking habits, it just seemed a little out of character, and it almost seems as if they wrote this specific plot to have that make sense of the reason that he wasn't drinking. And I almost feel like they could have done something that was that made it a lot more funny that he wasn't able to drink alcohol, and that you saw him sneaking a little bit of alcohol, and maybe he was in an accident and he was in a hospital and he ended up getting involved in a case there as opposed to going home with his family. This movie was a lot more corny than previous installments, and it was really weird. It was really weird going back to Nick Charles's family, and I know that we got to spend some time with Nora Charles' family, but it was something a little weird and off about this one that just didn't really feel right, and didn't really feel as entertaining as previous installments. You know, I did like the end to this one much better than I did with the film in fifth place, and that one is The Final Picture, Song of the Thin Man. I liked this movie a lot more than I thought I was going to, and it turns out it actually has an 85 or around that point on Rotten Tomatoes, which was really surprising to me, and I didn't expect to in any way like the final two films, as W.S. Van Dyke was not the director on them, and this one, along with the previous installment, did feel my favorite word at the moment, lackluster, and it didn't have the same chemistry between the Charleses and the other people around them, though there was still some there. So despite there being those differences that hindered the film in a way, there was still this incredible chemistry between our two main characters, Nick and Nora Charles. There was still the existence of Asta, and they do a really good job at having there be a Nicky Jr. and not having him take up so much of the space. As I had mentioned in a previous video, I believe it was when I was discussing uh, Shadow of the Thin Man, I felt that they did a really good job at adding this character and not having it just be the trajectory of this couple's relationship and not let him take up too much space when it came to the film, and Nicky Jr. definitely does that here as well. My biggest problem with this one is just the ending, and it was wrapped up far too quickly, and I completely understand wanting to do something different, but it just didn't really work that well for me here. The fourth spot on this list actually goes to the fourth film in the series, Shadow of the Thin Man. Now, the reason why this one is at this spot is because I definitely liked it more than I liked the first two, but it was definitely missing something when it came to the previous installments. And I believe a big part of that was it just didn't feel like the previous movies. They didn't feel like there was this it didn't fit into the very cohesive atmosphere that existed within the first three films, and I genuinely did like this movie, but I also felt like it would have been so much better as a standalone because we didn't get to spend as much time with Nick and Nora Charles, or at least that's what it felt like, and that definitely did this movie in particular a disservice. We had another couple come in, and that couple would have been a lot more entertaining, or just a lot better in general if they would have spent more time with Nick and Nora Charles in their investigations, as opposed to having it almost be as if there's two separate films happening in the one movie. In third place comes at no surprise, and that is the third film, Another Thin Man. I did really much enjoy this film, as well as the introduction of the child, and I do believe this is actually where I had mentioned the introduction of a child and what it can actually do to the movie, and in this case it becomes a little part of the plot, though it's not so ridiculous, which can happen in a lot of these. It is very funny, but it doesn't really bring anything extra special to the films, which is why it doesn't exist beyond its point at 3. My place at number 2 is actually the first Thin Man movie. Now, when it comes to the two best here, I definitely think they stand hand in hand, as the first and second Thin Man movies are absolutely great. One of the things that makes the first Thin Man movie so wonderful is that it is adapted from a book by Dashiell Hammett, who created these characters who have this incredible banter with each other. They're a really great married couple, and you have William Powell and Myrna Loy bringing them to life. The scripts are also written really well as being directed by W.S. Van Dyke. He really was the glue that held everything together, and this was an incredible introduction to these characters, as well as just being an amazing movie on its own. Now, number 1 on this list is actually the second film in the series after The Thin Man. I really love this movie. This is my personal favorite out of all of them, though The Thin Man does come in close second. Myrna Loy and William Powell come together with the new cast, and the tone has already been set, and everyone just meshes really well together. So it is a great continuation of what came before, but there's more added to it. There's even more energy than there was, and we've already gotten to know Nick and Nora Charles, and then we get to know them a little more based on some of their different relationships that they have. And here we are also introduced to Nora Charles' family and get to know more of the differences that are there between these characters. So that's added up with being able to see Jimmy Stewart in an early role, and there's a lot of great comedic moments mixed with a lot of sincerity. It makes this the standout film of them all. If you've seen the films and would like to rank them yourself, please put that in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. If you have anything else you'd like to say, or thoughts or feelings regarding any of the films or the film series as a whole, please let me know. If you like this video and want to see more like this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe and ring that bell to be notified every single time I post. If you haven't already and you love me, like me. I will be doing a video released next weekend where I discuss the mystery in Scream and how it is a well-written mystery. I will also be ranking all the Scream films in another video as well, all in preparation for Scream 6 coming out. So if you're interested in that, I definitely think that subscribing will do you a good service, or just, check back here on Sunday. I really hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!